Welcome to Guitar Nutrition. I'm Matt. Today we're talking about whether you should start on an acoustic guitar or an electric guitar. Spoiler alert, the right one is the one that you want to play. So, if you get inspired by this fantastic Hello Kitty number, then that's the right guitar for you. But let's break it down. So, back in the day when I was first getting into teaching, I used to be more of the opinion that you should start out on an acoustic guitar because that'll give you strong hands and stuff. And I think that was a pretty immature point of view on my part. I'll explain why. So, ultimately, when we learn to play the guitar, the basics are the same. Doesn't matter whether we're starting on an acoustic or an electric. We're going to need to learn the same fundamentals. So, an analogy that I thought of is like riding a motorcycle, which a lot of you probably don't do, but you know how there are different types of motorcycles. You've got your road bikes and then you've got your dirt bikes. And you use these motorcycles in entirely different realms, but they're both motorcycles. You still have to understand how to ride a motorcycle in both situations. However, the way that you specifically apply your motorcycle riding skills in each of those different situations differs a little bit, I think. I haven't actually ridden many dirt bikes, but I would like to. And so it's the same with a guitar. The fundamentals that we learn on an acoustic guitar are the same as the fundamentals that we learn on an electric guitar. All that happens is that we apply those fundamentals a little bit differently depending on the genre or the style of music that we might be playing. So you got to ask yourself, what kind of music do you want to be playing? Are you a singer-songwriter? Do you want to be playing Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran type stuff? Then great, maybe an acoustic guitar is right for you. But if your goal is to be playing Guns N' Roses, guitar solos, Metallica, then an acoustic guitar is probably not the right choice. You're going to be hitting a wall pretty quickly in terms of how easy it is to do the things that you want to do. The fundamentals are all still going to be the same, but you're going to be wanting to apply them in an environment that is not really what the instrument is set up for. So I said that back in the day, I used to think that you should start with an acoustic guitar because it gives you strong hands. I don't think that anymore. Acoustic guitars typically have heavier strings on them, which makes them a little bit harder to play. But the reality is that you're going to get strong and dexterous hands anyway playing whichever guitar you choose. And so then people say, oh, well, which one's easier to play? Which one should I start on? Now, here I want to talk about three categories of guitars. You've got your electric guitars, your steel string acoustic guitars, and then your nylon string acoustic guitars. Now, just because electric guitars have less tension on the strings doesn't mean they're necessarily easier to play. You don't have to push down as hard to play the notes, but it also means that if you push down too hard, you can kind of push the notes out of tune a little bit. Because there's more tension on an acoustic guitar, if you push down too hard, it's a lot more forgiving. Now, when it comes to which one's easier to play, it's not as clear-cut as you might think. I said that there's less tension on the strings of an electric guitar, so it's easier to press them down. That doesn't necessarily mean it's easier to play, because you can push the strings down too far, and that kind of makes them sound bad sometimes. When we press the strings down, we want to press them down just enough to touch the frets, not enough to kind of go past the frets. And so when you play an acoustic guitar, you can squeeze it pretty much as hard as you like, and you're never going to press them too much. But on an electric guitar, if you squeeze too hard, you might push them too far, and that might make it sound bad. So, in a sense, having more tension on the strings like you do with an acoustic guitar might actually make it easier to play. It depends what way round you want to think about it as to which one you might say is easier to play. But then if you're wanting to play guitar solos and that kind of thing, then an electric guitar is definitely easier to play because you're not going to be able to do bends and all of that stuff anywhere near as easily on an acoustic guitar. But if you're wanting to strum a whole heap of chords and that kind of thing, then that's probably going to sound better on an acoustic guitar than an electric guitar if that's the style that you're going for. Now, let's talk about acoustic guitars for a second. We'll break it down into subcategories. So we've got our steel string acoustic guitars and our nylon string acoustic guitars. I've heard people say that nylon string guitars are easier to play because they've got softer strings. You know, they're not steel strings, so they're not going to be as harsh on your fingers. Your fingers toughen up really quickly, so I don't really think that matters anyway, but they're not as tough on your fingers, and they're easier to press down. It's true, but one of the characteristics of a nylon string guitar is that the fretboard is typically a lot wider than on a steel string acoustic guitar, which means that even though it's easier to press the strings down, you might be having to reach a little bit further to get your fingers around the shapes. The other thing to think about when you're considering a nylon string guitar is, do the people you want to sound like play nylon string guitars? Because if they don't, then the music that you're playing on the nylon string guitar is not going to sound like theirs. So if you're trying to cover an Ed Sheeran song, you're doing it on a nylon string guitar, it's not really going to sound exactly like it should because he's not using a nylon string guitar. They've got slightly different qualities in terms of how they sound. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't sound how you want it to sound, you're not really going to want to practice it. I love picking up a guitar and playing it and thinking, this sounds great. You know, like you're inspired by the sound. You want to just play it because it sounds so cool. That's what you want out of your guitar when you're practicing it. Now, budget is a factor. How much money have you got to spend on the instrument? When you're starting out, it is cheaper to buy an acoustic guitar most of the time. When you buy a cheap acoustic guitar, like you just need the guitar. That's all you need to play something. You don't need to plug it into an amp. You don't need to get leads and all of that kind of stuff. It's cheaper to start with an acoustic guitar. But there are still quite a lot of affordable options when it comes to electric guitars, you know, cheap amps, cheap guitars, get a starter pack going. You can totally do that as well. And even as you progress on an electric guitar, you can use virtual amps and effects and that kind of thing. That's actually my preference. I have a pedal board sitting down here that I don't think I've actually used in like 4 or 5 years at this point, because all of my effects for my guitars are sitting inside my computer on plugins. They sound great. So there are cheaper ways to approach it when it comes to playing electric guitar, but electric guitars are a little more expensive initially. I hope you've seen that there's not really a clear-cut answer when it comes to what should you start on. There are pros and cons for any type of guitar depending on which angle you look at it from. So, like, ultimately, the question you have to answer is, what guitar do you want to play? Like, what inspires you? That might be how it looks. You might really love the color or the shape of a particular guitar. And if that's going to inspire you to pick it up and practice it, then you get that guitar. That's fantastic. But on the flip side, the guitar that you might prefer the look of might not be what you prefer in terms of feel or playing the guitar. This has happened to me a number of times. Take this guitar, for example. I love this guitar. This is one of my favorite guitars. This is a PRS guitar. I always used to hate this single cut shape. I preferred their double cutaway shapes. And I thought I'd never own a single cut one. So I didn't like the look of this guitar so much. But then I went and played it. And while I didn't like the look of it so much, I did love the features. I loved the natural rosewood neck. Felt incredible. I prefer natural unfinished necks. I really liked how it sounded. The pickups were amazing. It felt incredible to play. And aside from the single cut bit, I did like how it looked. I just didn't love the single cut bit. But it's grown on me over time. I bought the guitar because it felt incredible. And I'm so glad I did, because it's one of my favorite guitars now. But initially I didn't think that I liked the single cut vibe. It has grown on me a lot since. I actually like the single cut vibe now. So point being, even if you don't necessarily love the look of a certain guitar or whatever, you might like how it feels, or you might like some other aspect about it, or you might like how it sounds. So go play some. Go play some instruments in the shop. Now, when you're starting out, you might not really know a lot about how you want it to feel. And that's okay. You don't have to know that when you're starting out. But if you hold a guitar in your hands at the shop and you hold the neck and you compare that to another one in the shop, and then you'll get a sense of how you like it in your hands. Like, does the neck feel good in your hands? Is the body kind of annoying to hold? You'll get a sense of that kind of thing. So, key takeaway. Should you buy an acoustic or should you buy an electric? The answer is yes. Buy whatever one you want to start with. It ultimately doesn't matter. You're going to be learning the fundamentals on both guitars. There's no right or wrong answer here. So let me know in the comments, what did you start out on? Do you regret starting out on that? Did you progress to something different? I'm interested. Go play some guitar. I'll see you next time.